The LA Chargers and the Minnesota Vikings are both in very similar situations. Entering the season, very high expectations were set for both of these organizations. Some even saying that they were contenders and they could really go on a run and potentially put themselves in a position to be in the Super Bowl. But so far through 2 weeks, both of these teams sit at 0-2. Heading into week 3 for this matchup, there's a lot of implications that could occur because of who wins and or loses. The team that ends up going 0-3 puts themselves in a spot where they have less than a 10% mathematical chance to make the playoffs, and kind of ruins the entire rest of your year and makes you question a lot of kind of what your roster is going to be looking like from here on out. The team that moves to 0-2 or to 1-2 is only one game from being 500, and really it's kind of sitting right there in the wild card as it sits right now. So a lot of things could occur just because of this week 3 matchup. And because of that, I want to talk to you guys about everything that's going to be going into this matchup, comparing these two teams one against another, and talk about some of the keys to success on who will win this game. So the first thing I want to talk about here is going to be the offense. Both of these teams are mainly reliant on their offense, and they both can be powerhouses. You look at Minnesota, you have the number 1 wide receiver in the entire league in Justin Jefferson. Likely could go back-to-back for Offensive Player of the Year, and depending on how things go, maybe even ends up moving into the MVP candidacy. On the other side of things, you have Justin Herbert and a very well-rounded offense, and a lot of people thought he was going to be an MVP candidate. He's caught a lot of slack early on for some struggles on late game drives, but really if you kind of take a look at things objectively speaking, you look at his stats, he's still having a very good year, just a little bit struggles late on. You look at these offenses and there's a whole lot that can go into these things. I mean, you have such a rich passing offense from both of these teams. If you kind of compare these passing attacks, you go Vikings are the 2nd in the entire league. The Chargers are the 8th in the entire league in the passing attack. Both top 10 teams that primarily kind of focus on that. Now for the Chargers, they are statistically a little bit better in the rushing attack so far through 2 weeks, but when we kind of get to that, we're going to realize that they're still more of a pass-heavy team for a few reasons here. But if we take a look at passing, Kirk Cousins has the 2nd most yards, the most touchdowns passing, and is the 2nd in QBR rating. He's having a phenomenal year, and he's really being overlooked. A lot of people aren't noticing how good he's doing because of the 0-2 start. Now, that doesn't take into account some other things. His fumbling. He's fumbled the ball a lot, and that's kind of been a huge cause for why they've been losing these games as of late. So that's something that will be needed to be tightened up. But he's having a phenomenal year, and I think he's kind of getting unnoticed for that. You look at Justin Herbert, he's 8th in passing yards, 10th in touchdowns, 10th in QBR. But you do have to take a little bit of consideration that this is a brand new offense, and he's kind of relearning some things, especially coming from last year with Joe Lombardi, who was more of a, short yardage, kind of dink and dunk, where Kellen Moore seemingly is more of a longer, medium to long range kind of thing. And I feel like that's something that's hindering Justin Herbert a little bit. I think he's still relying on that running back and on those quick, get rid of the ball quick scenarios and getting yards later on. And it's kind of sad, but I think Joe Lombardi might have put that into his head. So there's going to be a couple walls that got to be broken down to get Justin Herbert back to what he fully is capable of. But he's still a top 10 quarterback statistically, probably top 5 quarterback in the league. In general, when you kind of take a look at things, maybe not the best start to the year. Had some struggles late in games, 4 drives there where he could have really put the game away against the Titans. He had a chance against the Dolphins. Whatever it may be, the offensive line giving up sacks, him not finding somebody, he has not been able to perform. The offense as a whole has not been able to perform to get the touchdown when you need them. Not on one guy, but both these guys are top 10 quarterbacks. Outside of that, your wide receivers, you have the number 1 wide receiver in the entire league for the Minnesota Vikings in Justin Jefferson. Arguably, and I'm going to argue for, Justin Jefferson is the number 1 wide receiver in the entire league. If you kind of take a look at some of these statistics from Justin Jefferson, he has the most receiving yards. Number 1 in receiving yards, second in receptions for more than let me correct myself here. A little bit of struggle. Most receiving yards, second in receptions for the year. He has the most receptions over 20 yards. So it's not just him getting short. He's getting, some deeper routes he's catching, and he's getting some yards. He gets great yards after catch. He's second in yards after catch. That's a huge statistic that we're going to be looking at in this game because the Chargers really struggle with that. They allow a lot of yards after catch, especially last year. Maybe not as much this year when you kind of look at things, but you also just faced Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle 2 weeks ago, and that's going to alter some things there. And he has 8 receiving first downs, which is the most. So he is doing phenomenal. Justin Jefferson is doing phenomenal. Probably the best receiver in the whole league. 8 20-plus yard receptions. He's doing great. The most receiving first downs. Second yards after catch. Most receiving yards. This guy is killing it. On the other side of things, the Chargers have probably the most consistent wide receiver and definitely one of the most underrated wide receivers in Keenan Allen. He's having a great year. A lot of people thought he was going to be regressing. I think he's kind of reinventing himself and showing that he still is great. You take a look at how Keenan Allen is doing. He sits at 8th in receptions, 9th in yards, and he's tied for 2nd in touchdowns after getting 2 last week. He's also doing phenomenal. Now, definitely not as high as Justin Jefferson, who is just coming off of 2 back-to-back 150-yard games. And in all actuality, I think it's going to be 3 in a row because of how the Chargers defense has been doing, especially against the passing attack, which ranks last in the entire league. And that's going to be a big thing we're going to cover here in a second. Outside of these two, both teams have a really good cast around them. You look at the Vikings, they have TJ Hawkinson, probably a top 5 tight end, at least top 10 tight end in the entire league. You have Jordan Addison, who has come in and done great. He's got a touchdown a game as a rookie. You go to the Chargers, you have Gerald Everett, who I think is definitely a top half tight end, maybe not having the best year so far, but doing well. Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, one of the best pairings in the entire league. And after that, Chargers have great depth as well, and I think the Vikings do as well. Great performance overall from these two passing. Outside of that, the run game is kind of a different story. It's not so close. The Chargers rank 5th in the rushing attack. The Vikings are last. Let's touch on the Vikings first. Them being last, a little bit of surprise for me, and I think for a lot of people. After you lose Dalvin Cook, you look at Addison, and you kind of thought that he was going to step into that RB1 role and do well very early on, but he just hasn't done that yet. I'm not sure exactly what it is. He's averaging somewhere between 3 and 4 yards per carry, which isn't bad, but it's definitely not what expectations were. They're the last in the entire league in the rushing attack, and the Chargers have upgraded. Last year they were one of the worst. The year before that, also one of the worst in rushing defense. Not so much this year. I think that's a good sign that I don't really see Addison turning it around quite this game. For the Chargers rushing attack, they're 5th in the entire league. That looks phenomenal, but you got to take into consideration a couple things here. Week 1, they were the number 1 team in the entire league in rushing yards. Joshua Kelly and Austin Eckler both had about 100 yards that week and were doing so good. But Austin Eckler ended up getting injured in that Dolphins matchup week 1. He did not play week 2. That left Joshua Kelly as your RB1, and he struggled a lot. From the looks of it, Austin Eckler is also not going to be playing this week's game, which is going to leave Joshua Kelly as an RB1 once again with Austin Eckler out, and that once again is going to limit you. And I think the Chargers are not going to stay as a top 5, top 10 rushing attack, at least for now until Austin Eckler gets back, because I think they can, but I think Austin Eckler is a big part of that. Now, I'm recording this early in the week. It is Wednesday. Things could change. Maybe Eck plays, but from the sounds of it, there's an unknown timeline. I don't think he returns that soon. So I think the Chargers probably not going to do that great on the ground either this week. Now, where that puts you is probably a pass-heavy attack. And there might be a little bit more running for one of these teams, which we'll cover here in a second when we get to the defense. But I think this is going to be a really, really heavy passing attack. And it's going to come down to the defense on whether this is going to be a shootout or a tight game. But I'm kind of leaning one way. Now, if we move over to the defense side of things, these two teams are very different. Offensively, I think they're very similar. Going to be, at least this week, pass heavy. The run's kind of going to be in the background. Lots of, deep attacks, all this. Defensively, I think they're quite different. In the passing game, the Chargers are 32nd in the entire league. They're the worst in the entire league at pass defense. Horrible thing, and especially for your head coach to be a defensive guru, which is something that is heavily debated on whether he should stay or he should go. But nonetheless, that's where you sit right now. The worst team in the league in, that passing defense. Going up against Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the league, a current top 3 quarterback based on statistics, and Kirk Cousins, this defense is probably going to get shredded. So if you're a fantasy guy, make sure you got Jordan Addison, make sure you got Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, whatever, starting, because they're likely going to have a great game. Now, as for the Vikings pass defense, they're doing pretty well. They're the 8th best in the league. So very solid, top 10 in that regard. Justin Jefferson, he's going to have an easy side for the going up against Chargers defense. On the other side of things, Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert might not have the easiest time. Now, we know how talented these guys are. We know what Justin Herbert's capable of. I think he's still going to have a good game. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if this week was the first interception that he throws, because it's a little bit more challenging. And I think this game, I think it's going to be a shootout, which he's going to have to take a little bit more risks. And I think that could lead to that first interception thrown. So, the worst passing defense for the Chargers and the 8th best for the Vikings, very different. As for the rushing defense, good news for the Chargers, they're not last in the entire league, which is great. But they're not great. They're about average. They rank at 15th in the rushing defense. They're just a little bit around, I think, 200 for the whole time. But they are going up against the Minnesota Vikings, which is the 4th worst against the run this year. Coming off of a game where they nearly allowed 200 yards to Swift alone against the Eagles. Let it be known, entering the year, Swift was not the starter. Now, I'm a big fan of Swift. I think he probably should have been. I think he'd be a starter on a lot of teams. So that's taking nothing from him. But nonetheless, 200 yards to one guy, that's a huge hit. And I think the Chargers maybe lean a little bit more heavily on the rushing game than I anticipate and a lot of us are going to anticipate, even without Austin Eckler. You have Joshua Kelly, you have Isaiah Spiller, you have Dotson, and you do have Xander Horvath at that fullback role. I think they might lean a little bit more on that rushing attack. But I kind of have a feeling that it's going to go away pretty early. Maybe the first quarter, the first half, they might lean on it, and then it's going to start scoring a lot, and you're going to run out of time to lean on that rush attack. But nonetheless, you're going against the 4th worst. This could be something that quickly could get out of hand. You let Kelly get 5 here, 5 there, get a couple ones rolling, and then all of a sudden he breaks away for 20. Or, more. These things can get out of control pretty quick. So, for the Vikings, they still have to pay attention to preventing the run, but I don't think it's going to be a huge factor in this game. So, outside of that, the keys to success. What do these two teams need to excel at to win this game? Now, the first thing, we've covered this heavily, is going to be the passing attack. Which team, offensively, can really get it going early and put that foot down so you can eliminate, that rushing attack from the other team, force them to take a little bit more risk and prevent, potentially cause some turnovers, which we're going to talk about in a second here. Turnovers is going to be a huge factor in this game. After that, what defense can stop? The Chargers are last in the entire league, but if you look at this roster, it should be working better. Week 1, no sacks. Week 2, I think they had about 5. Really got things going. You look at the DBs, they have enough where it can get going. It just seems something's not clicking. Whether that's Staley's defense is not doing good, he's not calling the right plays. Maybe it's too complex for some reason. I'm not quite sure. But I could see this defense passing, at least wise, start to take a turn, whether that's this week or maybe after the bye is long enough. I could see them start to take a turn. You have Michael Davis, you have Asante Samuel Jr., you have J.C. Jackson, you have Ja'Sir Taylor, Derwin James. I think you have the DBs that can lock teams down, even good teams. You're struggling so far. Maybe for some reason this is the week. Maybe after 2 tough losses that are really, really close. This is their turning point where everyone is just upset and they maybe take a little bit more risks, and that could turn out to be good things, or that could turn out to be the opposite. This is going to be all about the passing defense. Who can play better defensively, and for the offense, who can put up those points very early on to put the pressure on the other team. The next key is going to be turnovers. This is the big reason why the Vikings are 0-2. For the Chargers, it's their defense. Their offense is doing great, but their defense can't stop anything. For the Vikings, turnovers is their problem. The Vikings already turned the ball over 7 times in just 2 games. 3.5 is their average. That is a ton, including 4 against the Eagles just last week. That is a lot of turnovers. And there was still some that didn't, like they fumbled and they got the ball and that wasn't a turnover, but you're still able to get it loose. A lot of these are tied turners. This is going to be a huge factor in this game. The Vikings are -6 in the turnover ratio. The Chargers are +2. These two teams are very different. The Chargers, Justin Herbert has 0 interceptions. I honestly don't think the Chargers have turned the ball over, at least fumbles or interceptions-wise, quite yet. The Vikings, they've had plenty. Most of them are coming from fumbles, but still, you might get a chance here where you see J.C. Jackson or Zont go get an interception. So, this is going to be a huge, huge factor. If these turnovers keep occurring for the Vikings, this game could be very different. Now, they're going to keep it close. Even with all these turnovers, the Vikings have kept each game in 1 possession. The next thing is going to be talking about those tight games and talking about how this game likely is going to come down to the 4th quarter. Really, really tight game all the way through. It's going to come down to the 4th quarter. It might even come down to the last, 3 or 4 drives. Each team gets 2 chances. If they're able to score, separate it, or bring it closer, it's really going to be a fight. Every Chargers game seems to be like that. I don't think this is going to be any different. It's going to be down to the very end. Justin Herbert, he's struggled in the past 2 weeks with completing these games, being clutch, finishing these games. Can he turn that around? As for the Vikings, these turnovers might put them in a situation where they're behind and they have to fight their way back. Who knows? This is going to be a very, very close game all the way to the end. For the Chargers, what is their biggest key is going to be that pass defense. You're going against the #1 wide receiver in the entire league. Very good quarterback, good encore around them in Hawkinson and Addison. I think that if they can slow down, you're not going to stop these guys. If you can slow down that passing attack, that's going to have a huge, huge factor in how the Chargers do. For the Vikings, it's going to be these turnovers. Can they stop these turnovers? Because the likelihood of winning when you're losing the turnover battle is not high. Can they turn that around? Can they turn the tides? That's going to be the big factor for them. So in conclusion, let's get my predictions. Now, I will say, I will be attending this game. This is going to be my first NFL game that I'll ever be attending. I'm very excited for it, but I'm also very stressed. If the Chargers go to 0-3, this is going to be a depressing game to drive home from. If they move to 1-2, this is going to be exciting, but still a lot ahead of you with a tough matchup. Raiders, Chiefs, Cowboys, I think, are coming up. A lot of tough battles. As for the Vikings, for them, moving to 0-3, same situation as for the Chargers. You're pretty much plummeting your chances to make the playoffs. But you move to 1-2, you're giving yourself a chance to, turn it around, make the playoffs, or win the division. Both these guys are not too far off. I think, I think both of these, if they win, they're only 1 game behind owning the division. Either one of these teams could be the top of the division in 2 weeks if things turn out well. For the Vikings, coming up next after this, you have the Panthers. That should be a decent matchup they could handle. And then the Chiefs, and then the Bears. So the Vikings, a little bit easier of a schedule after this. Chargers, not so much. Keeping it, very, very difficult. My prediction, as I'm sitting there in attendance at this game, my first prediction is this is going to be a game that is going to come down to the final drive. Maybe final 2 drives, because maybe someone gets a chance and they can't quite punch the ticket there, and then the final minute is just, can you get the first down, kneel it, and the game. So like final drive, final 2 drives, this is going to be a last minute decision. I honestly think that this is going to be a little bit more defensive heavy than we're initially thinking. I think the offense for both these teams is going to be going crazy. I think there's going to be a lot of points. But I do think some of these points might be coming off of a turnover that puts you in a good situation to score. So my prediction for this game is both these teams are going to score over 30 points. The Chargers, I think, are averaging 29 points allowed per game after allowing, 27 last week, 36 week 1. The Vikings are not so much. They allowed 34, but they only allowed 20 in that first week. I think both these teams are going to score over 30. I think this is going to be a 1-possession game. Vikings, through 2 weeks, lost by 9 points. Chargers, through 2 weeks, lost by 5 points. I'm going to say this is going to be a 35-32 game. And it is unbearably close on me coming to a decision who I think is going to win. I could see either of these teams winning. I could see both these teams making the playoffs no matter what the outcome of this game is. But there is something in me that is saying that the Chargers are going to win this. There's something that's telling me the Chargers are going to win this. I think they're going to be upset. Staley, everyone's calling for his name. He's going to go for a couple 4th downs here. And if he converts them, he's going to put himself in a better position. I think Justin Herbert is sick of everyone saying that he's not clutch, and he's going to clutch up at the end. That's what I'm thinking. It's going to be a 1-possession game, and Herbert is going to go get that touchdown to win the game. And for the Vikings, I think they're going to definitely keep up. I think they're going to have the lead going towards the end, with the Chargers having to go score a touchdown. And I think, once again, Justin Jefferson is going to have 150 yards. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a great game. But the Chargers are going to barely come out on top. But honestly, I could be swayed, and I wouldn't be shocked at either outcome. But what do you guys think? Who's going to win? Who's going to be the biggest factor in this game? And are either of these teams going to end up making the playoffs when it's all said and done? Comment all that down below. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. I am finally back on YouTube, and I'm so excited. And as always, if you guys enjoy this, please like and subscribe. But most importantly, I hope you learned something today. There's so much to learn every single day, whether it was about the Chargers, whatever it may be. I hope you learned something today. I hope it made you smile. I hope it made you laugh. That's something that's really important to me. Affects the most of the day in a great way, because every single day can be a great day if we all just put in the effort. And, as always, you guys all be safe out there.